Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. 2 points, or 3 points from the previous Minister's speech, 2 points of agreement and 1 of clarification. The first, she says, every day the difference between the parties on that side and this side become clearer. And I say, thank God for that, because New Zealanders are not that stupid, Mr Speaker. They know that that side has delivered empty promises of 170,000 new jobs, promises of prosperity for who? The second thing, I'll agree with her, is that they think they'll reach surplus in 2014-15. Well, that may be the case. The question is, surplus for who? Not for the average Kiwi, I can tell you that, but for your greedy, wealthy mates. Mr Speaker, not you, but the National Party. The third point, that the outrageous exaggeration that we would have incurred $100 billion debt on this country. Mr Speaker, Bill English admitted in the House today that the National Party will incur a debt of $61 billion on this country, $61 billion, Mr Speaker, under his current plan. Well, Mr Speaker, the Speaker also made great claims about how they had rebalanced and done great things for the productive sector and what the RMA is going to do, Mr Speaker. Can I quote? Growth in the non-tradable or inward-facing side of the economy has outstripped the tradable sector, which has not really grown at all over the past 4 years. Those are the facts. And the National Party, the wonderful champions of the farming sector and the productive sector, have done absolutely nothing to assist with their growth and development. Those facts speak for themselves. The tradable sector, the sector that Bill English said when he came in 2009, he was going to rebalance the economy to benefit the tradable sector. And in fact, in 2010, I think a colleague in the House today said that he mentioned rebalancing so many times in his budget speech. Mr Speaker, he doesn't mention it now, because the only rebalancing that's been done under the national government, Mr Speaker, is to tip the table in the favour of all those people who have wealth and who have privilege. It's not even possible for the crumbs to fall up the table to those poor people who don't have any capital, Mr Speaker. It's not just been a hands-off, it's been a hands-on in favour of the wealthy. And this budget does absolutely nothing to rebalance the economy, either in favour of the tradable sector or in a way that helps the average hard-working Kiwi, Mr Speaker. We have a two-speed economy. We have an economy for the haves and another economy for the have-nots, Mr Speaker. We've had tax cuts for the rich from the first budget of the national government, and we had GST imposed on the poor. On every single thing they spend money on, they've paid more GST and more tax, Mr Speaker. The wealthy, on the other hand, can siphon off money into areas where GST is not incurred. That one single advantage. Mr Speaker, we've had increased opportunities for people importing into this country under the high dollar, and we've had increasing barriers and hurdles and challenges for anyone exporting. Where, Mr English, is the help for the tradable sector in that area, Mr Speaker? We've had increasing profits for home speculators and decreasing opportunities for the average New Zealander to buy a home. Well, we had in the last budget some token movement, we say, the government says, in favour of those people struggling to buy a home. We know it simply will not work. You need to build houses on the ground, not simply make it harder for people coming in at the bottom end to buy a house. And that's what they've done with the new deposit ratios, Mr Speaker. The National Party says it has plans. In fact, the previous speaker said, about wonderful thing about spending on infrastructure. Well, there are roading plans for projects of National Party significance, Mr Speaker, because they're all around the cities, not out in the rural areas, and we had no further funding in that area from this budget. And ask the regional council chairs and the mayors in the South Island what they think about the current system of allocating funding for roading, Mr Speaker. They're being squeezed. They know that the productive areas of Southland, out on the west coast, Mr Speaker, in Canterbury, are not getting the funding for roading, Mr Speaker, that they should do. We've got an education. We've got a determination by a pig-headed government to put in place National Party standards. Well, they sold it very quietly as national standards, but it's National Party standards, because the parents out there who think that kindly thought that they were getting some equal opportunity to measure their child against someone from the island or another school or whatever, from north to south, east to west, they've simply been hoodwinked once again, because we've seen recently, and there are delays, I understand, in publishing the first outcomes of the National Party standards in education, Mr Speaker, we are seeing what we call moderation, EASTL, and now a new PACS tool. If you talk to principals in your electorate, and there might be a few over there who do, they are horrified with the manipulation of the National Party standards in education that will undermine the goodwill, the high quality and the commitment in education that has driven our system to be one of the best in the world. Mr Speaker, it is stupidity. Mr Speaker, we need a government with a plan. What we've got at the moment is we've got a Minister of Finance and a Prime Minister who think they are steering the economy in the right direction. Well, the analogy I use, Mr Speaker, is of putting someone in a trolley cart at the top of a hill. We put them up there with a zero government debt, putting them in, giving them the ropes and letting gravity take the trolley downhill. And Mr English thinks that steering around the corners is achieving the goal. Mr Speaker, the fact is that we need a government that drives the economy, not just steers it. And that's what Labor will do. Because in driving an economy, we will be utilising more technology than a trolley cart, not relying solely on gravity to take us forward, and not just thinking that steering around the corners is going to deliver the benefits to this country into the future. Mr Speaker, we need someone driving, someone who can brake, can accelerate, can overcome the hurdles, can compensate for the inevitable challenges that are thrown up in front of this country in an economic sense, Mr Speaker. But Bill English thinks the market and gravity will take this country to where it needs to go. It won't, Mr Speaker, and that's why we have a plan. The National Party has never had a plan. They rely on the market, Mr Speaker, and they rely on their mates to deliver them the best outcomes. The only thing the national government has done for the tradable sector or the trading sector is increase the turnover on the New Zealand Stock Exchange by allowing, firstly, Fonterra units, Mr Speaker, by then putting our assets onto the stock exchange so that traders can make a small profit and a small fortune. Mr Speaker, the tradable sector that needs help are the farmers out there. What did this budget do for them? Well, in biosecurity, we saw a cut of $6 million to frontline services. Now, people haven't picked up on this yet, Mr Speaker, but they will, because in the agribusiness sector, biosecurity has been identified time and time again as the #1 threat to our economy, to our biodiversity, and to every single part of our economy that relies on tourism, that relies on primary production, or indeed, as I say, to protect our biodiversity. This government has just cut the funding to biosecurity. They've done well to try and bury that in the budget, Mr Speaker, but it will become apparent. Their first budget cut $2 million, and then they've tried to make up by restructuring of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry to the Ministry of Primary Industries, cut out a few people in policy, Mr Speaker, and said all is well. Last week exposed the flaws and the problems within MPI, Mr Speaker. The next weeks will expose the flaws in biosecurity because this government has cut it. The NovaPay debacle has put the system, the joint system of computer control information sharing, the joint border management system on hold, Mr Speaker. They've even mucked up that. But frontline border biosecurity systems have been cut because of this budget, and our economy is at risk. 1.5 million tonnes of palm kernel coming into this country every year from countries where foot and mouth is endemic. Mr Speaker, mark my words, This government has failed in the area of biosecurity. It's failed to protect primary producers up and down this country, Mr Speaker, and we're sitting on a knife edge, and if we don't keep out some of those pests and diseases, this economy will collapse, Mr Speaker, and it will be the national government who will be responsible for that.
I call the Honourable Minister Chris Tremaine.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.